Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back again to As I Live and Grieve. So happy you're joining us again. I do hope you come in every week and just listen in. Fascinating guest this week. Of course, you will find out very shortly. She has a beautiful accent. Debra Driscoll is with me today. Hi, Debra. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, Kathy. I'm joining you from the future. I'm a day ahead of you, even though we're in the same moment now. Because
You are. That's something that's still mind-boggling to me, even though I know it exists and everything. It's mind-boggling to me. You are in Australia right now.
Right now, yes.
But your home is actually in Tobago.
Correct.
So you are really, I just I'm so jealous. You're a world traveler. But at any rate, Debra, would you start out by just giving our listeners a little bit of your background, please?
Absolutely. And Kathy, thank you for inviting me into this conversation. And hello, everybody listening. My name is Deb D, and I am a grief guide and a magic weaver and the founder of Big Life Magic. So my work is all about our process of healing our heart, the transformation from our big life loss to our big life magic, because I do believe it's possible. It's not always easy, can be a bit tricky, but it is possible to shift from loss to magic. And loss, I believe, is universal, Kathy. I think it meets all of us.
It is. It is, especially with the pandemic having overwhelmed everybody. You know, I would be surprised if there was anyone in the world that is not or has not grieved, especially at some point over the last few years with COVID.
Absolutely.
And as we've talked about too, grief can be more than just the death of a loved one. It can be the loss of a lifestyle or of a dream. It can be the dissolution of a marriage. It can be the loss of a job. It can be so many things. So grief is there for all of us in any shape or form. Today, we specifically are going to talk about grief as it relates to the death of a loved one. And that's primarily what our podcast does focus on. I myself have had 4 major losses in my life. Most recently was losing my husband about, almost 5 years ago now. And I still feel it and I still grieve. So we have come to accept some universal truths in our neck of the woods that grief is unique for everyone. I also have to say it's unique for each individual with each loss they suffer.
Absolutely.
Because my losses, I have grieved differently for each one of them. Some due to my age, some just due to, the society and culture around me as well. And some just plain due to my lack at the time of awareness of what grief really was and what I was supposed to do. So today, Debra, we're here primarily because our paths crossed with your book, A Series of Surrenders. Tell us just a little bit about the book, what it's about, and why you wrote it.
Thank you. I had one of the most delicious, creative, nurturing, nourishing times in the writing of the book, A Series of Surrenders. I loved deep diving into the narrative. So The Series of Surrenders is a memoir, and it's chronicling the deaths of 3 amazing people, men in my life. Nick, the very first man I ever fell in love with. My father, Colin, and my son, Sage. So the lover, the father, and the son. A great trifecta for a woman to be in relationship to, and to lose all 3 of those men over periods of time in my life. And in the book, similar to what you were saying, Kathy, it's like each death was different with how I grieved. And also Nick and my father, Colin, they died very close to each other, 7 months apart. And I was 20, turning 21. And I had no idea about how do you navigate death or grief. And within 7 months, it was a part of my family. It was a part of all of my friend network. It was like everyone I knew was touched by death and grief. And really, none of us knew what was going on, you know, and we did the best that we could. It just wasn't necessarily the most healing or helpful process for me as a person. And the thing that I, you know, and it took a couple of years to actually really process it. And I promised myself in the healing of it that if death and grief ever came to visit me again, that I would not deny her, that I would not deny the feelings and the process, that I would be with it. Little did I know that, you know, 18 years later, my son Sage would unexpectedly die 1 month before his 11th birthday. So it was like, whoa, did you really promise yourself that, Deb? Because now you're going to have to come good on that promise. And it set me off on an amazing healing journey for a part of my healing of, okay, I didn't do grief so well, which is why now I'm in a deep, dark hole in my mid-20s.
Right.
Part of that was this great exploration of what's possible in the healing realm. What's possible in the world of magic and miracles? And I started to study and learn, and I found amazing teachers. You know, like Kathy, I was studying aromatherapy before aromatherapy was even a thing, you know, like when it was like, you know, no one was really talking about it. Well, you couldn't buy it in the shops yet. You know, I was the person studying, learning all of that. And then when my son Sage died, I turned all that I had learned onto myself. And I asked myself the question, will it be enough? Will this be enough? Can I survive this? Can I keep myself above the waves of grief? And if I can survive, is there any way to thrive? What's possible? And that's the journey with this series of surrenders.
Right. Well, it's a fascinating book. You start the book out, and this intrigued me, and I didn't really, I still don't know that I fully understand the concept, but I come to learn quite a bit about it. In your introduction, you mentioned the compass, and I'm looking right at the page now, and it says the compass is the tool that holds a direction and points the way forward and home. The moon, the light in the dark that teaches of cycles, change, and the never-ending story of letting go and beginning again. And the elements, in equal balance, they build form and foundation of our earthbound experience. And then each section in the book, you use these same concepts. What does that mean? How does all of that fit and help you define your grief journey?
I love this question. And Kathy, you're the first person to ask me directly about that, the question. Because I think some people make assumptions or they think they understand it. Some people do. But that is the magic weaver part of me. So, you know, my experience in life has meant that I have developed the skills and ability to be able to be a grief guide for others. And my journey has also, as I explained, been around a lot of exploration on, you know, healing practices and ritual and magic weaving, which can mean lots of different things to different people, depending on where you are in the world, depending on how you were brought up. But for me, my magic, which is my spiritual practice, is grounded in connection to the elements and connection to nature. So that's why we have the cardinal direction, the 4 elements and the 4 phases of the moon, because for me, they are actually part of my practice in terms of understanding how I can navigate any particular loss, magic, or transformation in my life. So an example of that would be after my son Sage died, it wasn't immediate. It was maybe on the 3rd or the 4th day after his death. I had this flash moment where I was like, okay, what's the moon doing? Where is the moon? And I noted that the moon at the time was waning, which is the moon after the full moon when it's letting go of its light. That's called the waning moon phase. So for me, as a magic weaver, I saw the moon letting go, and I was like, okay, I can be supported by the moon in this moment because the moon is letting go. Sage has let go back to spirit. I need to also let go. I need to let him go. I need to do as the moon's doing and just release now. And then over the first month of my life, beyond being the single parent, now the grieving mother, I followed the moon. For after waning moon, you have new moon. And at new moon is when you set a new intention, or there's a new chapter begins. And at the moment of new moon is when the community all gathered together and we held the memorial service for my son. So it was like a celebration of his life. And also for me, it was like, this is the first ritual that acknowledges I am now the grieving mother, not the single mother who's getting the lunchbox ready and have you found your shoes? Have you got your homework? All of that part of my life was finished. So a new chapter in my life was beginning. And then you carry forward, like by full moon, we were burying my son. And that's the culmination of the moon cycles. And that was the culmination of my rituals, surrendering my son's body to the earth. So whether it's the elements, the cardinal directions, or the phases of the moon, they can all give us navigation points. Because what happens, which I find a lot in the work I do with people, and also for myself at times, we can get lost inside our loss. You don't know the way. You don't know what the next step is. And so these are navigation points.
How did you learn about these and learn to trust in these?
The trust, let me go there, because that's, I think, where the true magic is. And that happens over time. Like a lot of my learning was, reading books, doing my own research, following other people who, at the time were my teachers of the day, trying different things out for myself. Like when I first started working with moon magic, is many years ago now, I would go to any opportunity. Someone was having a moon meditation. I was the one who was there. I wanted to meet that person who was doing that moon meditation. And what do you do in a moon meditation? So for the first few years, it was my curiosity. But the trust comes in making these, rituals or practices your own. What does it mean to you? Because if you're doing the process based on, like the book says, do this first, that second, that third, and then there you go, you're following the moon, or the elements are supporting you. That's the way you begin. But the trust begins in finding your own relationship with these rituals, so that you are in a relationship that feels nurturing, or is a relationship that can hold you, because that's what rituals do. Is, again, they can give you not so much the navigation points, but they can hold you in your loss transformation, or in just the moment where the loss is the loss is the loss is the loss. And that's all I'm feeling right now. But if you don't trust that ritual, if you don't trust that practice, then it's like trying to put the round piece inside the square hole. It's like, well, that's not going to work, just because the book said. So the trust comes in developing it for yourself. And some of that was, I had amazing teachers along the way.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you trusted your teachers, of course.
Yeah.
So that helped you learn to trust. I grew up in a family, of course, that was every Sunday we went to church. I was raised an Episcopalian, and everything was based on tradition. And then as an adult, I moved out of state. I moved down south and was actually surrounded by a community of people from the Southern Baptist Church. And they convinced me to go to church with them. I think my mother became apoplectic when I told her about it. But the one thing that really struck me about this small church was that they didn't need a prayer book
Mm.
to say a prayer. It wasn't a prayer that was memorized. And I guess that was probably the first time in my life that my eyes became open to the fact that there was more to it
Yeah.
than this archaic tradition that I had grown up in and that I had been instructed in. And for the first time in my life, I learned that you could pray just by saying what was in your heart, just asking for that strength and asking for that support. But then again, it wasn't until, well, I'm later in my life at this point, but it wasn't until about maybe a decade ago that my eyes became more open to the fact that there was more than just this church-centered community of faith, that there were other things, as you say, the moon, the elements. And I really began to absorb a bit more. Yet I feel so sad for myself that my eyes weren't opened so many years ago, because I wonder what my life might have become. Yet in the meantime, here I am, learning and being fascinated with that learning. So to find someone like you, Debra, that is so comfortable in that state already, such that when you lost your son, which I don't believe any being ever really intended that a parent should lose a child. But for whatever reason, I think that's one of the cruelest things, one of the harshest things that can ever happen. Yet to do that and find strength to create these rituals that you did is just amazing to me. And I'm just truly fascinated and in awe of your strength to go through that when so many people would just still be sitting on the sofa.
Oh, thank you for acknowledging that. I do see that in myself. And also, I want to be honest and say there were moments I sat on the sofa. You know?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. There was moments where there was
Sure.
rivers of wine and ugly tears, and, that's all a part of the story too. But in the writing of a series of surrenders, because I didn't write it until my son had already been passed for 5 years. But I knew within weeks of his death that I would write a book. And I hadn't even been on the journey yet. I just knew, because also part of my knowing is I have a very strong intuition. So when I receive a very strong message, I know to trust it, say thank you, and, follow whatever the guidance was. But I also knew that I wouldn't write the book until I was sure that it was at service. I didn't want to write a book that was, yes, maybe a wonderful story, but like completely anchored in me and my experience.
Right.
My intention in writing the book was to actually create a space for others to be able to, through my story, reflect on their own heart and their own grief journey. And so when I receive messages from readers or listeners saying just that, like, thank you because it gave me a chance to see my father's death or my sister's passing in a new way, that gives me the strength to continue to be speaking and writing and sharing about these grief rituals, because that is actually one of that's to me one of my North Stars, is wanting to advocate for grief. And so, like I say, grief is not invited to the party, but she should be, because we will all meet loss. And grief is not easy to navigate, but it is an amazing alchemist for our heart energy.
Right. And I love how you're personifying grief, but why is she female?
I don't know, actually. And one of my really good friends, who was one of the early readers of the book years ago when I was writing it, he asked me exactly the same question. And I said, I don't know, but I think it's perhaps a part of, for me, there's she definitely feels female, but she also feels like she has a mother energy in her also. Because like for me, I feel like I can sit in the lap of grief And to me, she's
Okay.
an angel, and she wraps me in her wings. And, you know, when I was young, it was my mother's lap I wanted to sit in, you know. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And who knows, for other people, grief may be non-binary, male, a unicorn,
Right.
you know? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So is it your feeling then, am I understanding correctly, that you think we should almost embrace grief instead of try to hide from it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And again, and I always say, this is not easy. I say grief is exquisite. It's unique, it's deep, it's edgy, and it's also, I believe, a part of the human design for hearts break, but souls bounce. And a part of our evolution in terms of understanding love, in understanding ourselves and the world and why we're here, depending on, you know, it's different for different people in what culture or religion or traditions that you have. But if we deny grief, then we're denying our full feeling experience as a human. For grief is soulmates to joy. So in our heart repair, so it's like the idea of, you know, how people say, well, what's the opposite of love? It's not hate, it's fear. So you want to, so imagine this, it's like in your left hand is love, in your right hand is fear. You bring the two together and you have a prayer, you have a balance point. Love and fear. So it's this idea of like our heart has these extremes, love and fear, grief and joy. And it's actually about tempering our heart to the extremes of both. So joy is, you know, humans want more joy. We're chasing happiness. You know, joy can come to the party, absolutely. But grief we want to deny. But what happens is, if we deny grief, we're actually denying also joy, because we're constricting the capacity of our hearts. If we allow ourselves to fully grieve and allow ourselves to fully expand in our grief, and again, it's like, get some support, find some rituals, figure out how that becomes possible for you, depending on the grief and the loss that you're working with. But it's highly recommended, because on the other side of that, you've built this amazing capacity for your heart that can stretch in the other direction just as far. And that other direction is joy. This is my experience. Like, this is absolutely my experience, which is why my work, the heart of my work is on heart repair. And it's about your transformation of big life loss to big life magic.
I love it. I love what you've said. And it's helped me better understand myself, because I think my most recent grief experience after losing my husband, what I have gone through, and even with this podcast as being part of that, I mean, that was, talk about getting a message to do something. It just about hit me in the head. But it has made me into a different person, certainly, but a person that I am so much happier being.
Yeah.
And I love where I am now in my life for the first time in my life, for the very first time in my life. And I have to say, I think it's because I've gone into this grief, and I have pulled it with me, and I have molded it into the life I'm living now. It's part of me every day. It's still with me and will be forever. And that's perfectly okay. One more quick question, and then I'm going to turn it over to you for a bit.
Sure.
So many times we're tired of tradition. And if we lose someone in our life, there's the funeral home, there's the calling hours, there's the memorial service. If we wanted to do something different, like the rituals you did are amazing. I've never attended anything like that, and I would dearly love to. If we wanted to do something like that, where might we start to find either someone to give us inspiration or ideas, Or where would we start?
Again, a beautiful question. So, such deep tapestry here of threads and colors. I mean, start with who is around you and what is around you. For when I started working in ritual, many, many moons ago now, Kathy, I wasn't alone. I had a couple of friends who were interested too. Okay. So we would work it out together. Like, I think that there's something about finding the flock. Or like when I first started to follow the moon, you know, if there was a woman who was offering a moon meditation, I was there. So it's like a little bit about like meeting and finding yourself there. And also you can create ritual on your own. And ritual doesn't have to be this big, fancy, all the candles are lit, the incense is burning, it's the perfect Zen spot, now we're ready for the ritual. A ritual can actually be just something that you do each day. A ritual can be about space. Like a lot of the people who I work with, I invite them to create an altar space. And the altar space doesn't have to be pictures of the person they lost. It can be if they want. But it can also be a ritual space around, you know, what do you feel like you've got support with angels now? Do you want to put some angelic support on your altar? Or is there something that you're wanting to bring into your life as you journey through this grief? Do we want to put a symbol of that on your altar? So there's lots of different ways that you can do it, but I do offer to people when working with ritual, I go back to, it's about the relationship. It has to feel good to you. It has to feel like it's supporting you. So you may start with reading a book. You may start with watching and following someone on YouTube. You may start with asking your friends, like, who would like to make some wishes by the full moon maybe? You know, let's go sit at the lake together. Or, you know, but start simple, because ritual doesn't have to be complicated. Start where you're at, but ensure that you feel supported by it, because that's the whole beauty in the magic of ritual, is that the ritual will support you.
And what beautiful memories those must be too, of the rituals you had that included your son and your son's memory. They were beautiful I listened to the audiobook. And for one thing, it was in your own voice, which made it even more special to me. But I still remember some of the passages where you described the ritual and everything. And they are such tender moments for me that I thought were just outstanding, just beautiful.
I'll just finish with sharing this story because it's about a ritual, and it happened last weekend. Last weekend, I had the Australian launch of the audiobook version of A Series of Surrenders, and I was on a patch of earth where 2 decades before my son Sage's first birthday naming ceremony was, the first ritual I held for my son. And then 10 years later, it was the same site for his memorial. And then now another 10 years later, last weekend, the community gathered again, and we had a ritual for the blessing of the book. And in attendance, I had Nick's parents, my mother, my siblings, Sage's teachers, community members who had been with me through more than one of those losses. It was an amazing community of people who over 3 decades have been a part of this story, and we were back on the same patch of earth for the third ritual. It was deeply moving.
I'll bet. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. I'm going to be thinking about that later when every evening I have some quiet time just to myself, and that's going to be on my mind.
See, Kathy, that's a ritual. That's a ritual. A ritual is something you repeat.
You're absolutely right.
A ritual is something you repeat that supports you. You have a ritual.
Yeah, I do. And it's my very own.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to turn the mic over to you for a few moments, Debra, so you can speak directly to our listeners without me interrupting or leading you with questions. let them know a bit more about your book, where to get it, kind of what you're doing now, and what you would like to tell our listeners. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. For those who have stayed with Kathy and I through this conversation, it is my delight to share stories of my loved ones and my journey with grief. And I also hold space for grieving hearts. And I hold space for the magic curious. I hold both spaces. And the ways that I do that is through my writing and my teaching and the community that I develop. So if you're interested in connecting with me or my story, what I would suggest is you find me, biglifemagic.com. So my business is called Big Life Magic, and that is the umbrella for all of the work around ritual, whether it be the moon or another ritual, all of the work around transformation from loss to magic, and also the place where a lot of my writing lives. So you can also follow some of my stories through that website. I also teach via YouTube, which to me is such fun because I'm really enjoying building that community on YouTube. But at the moment, my heart really is in the relaunch of a series of surrenders, a memoir of grief, which Kathy and I have spoken about today. And this is what I want to share with you. In the show notes, there is a link that will take you to the various ways you can buy the book, whether you want the print book that you hold in your hand, the ebook that's on your Kindle or your iPad, or you want to listen to me share the stories with you via an audiobook version. All of those links are there, but there's also a special gift for you if you follow that link. And the gift is a meditation that I have recorded titled Embraced by Grief. So I mentioned it in this conversation with Kathy. For me, grief is a beautiful angel and I can crawl into her lap and she wraps me in her wings. And that's exactly what happens in this meditation, embraced by grief. So if you feel like you want to develop your relationship with grief, if you feel like you want to sit in her lap, then I invite you to follow the links to download your version of Embraced by Grief. And if you do happen to read any of my stories or listen or read a series of surrenders, I love hearing the stories. I love receiving the emails and the messages. So please reach out and let me know about your heart and your heart repair.
Thank you, Debra. Thank you again so much. Listeners, even though I always hate this time because I just enjoy our conversation so much, and I just know that it's helping you out there. It's helping many of you just to have someone to listen to and that you can say, oh, I'm not alone. And you're not. You're not. I think about wherever you might be, anywhere in the world, I think about you all the time. And we try to bring you conversations that may pique your curiosity, may soothe you, may give you some support, or may just help you get up off the couch and say, I'm curious about that, and I don't want to live like this anymore. So I need to do something. So wherever you are in the world, the holidays are fast approaching. This book would make a magnificent gift for the holidays. Please consider it. If you don't want to read it, maybe you know someone that might appreciate it. You can share it, but I prefer that everybody just get their own copy. And I prefer the audiobook because who doesn't want to listen to Debra? You've listened to her for about a half hour, but her voice is so soothing and it's just something to treasure. So until we all catch up again with each other next week, take care of yourselves. We talk about self-care all the time. You must take care of yourself. Please, please, please. Continue on the journey, and we'll catch you again next week as we all continue to live and grieve.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.